Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emma Jane Alexander. I manage a visualization facility at the University of Wyoming. Now, today I'm going to talk to you about virtual reality and also about health, risk, and education. I'm going to focus in on two virtual reality projects that are both health-orientated. One is focusing on obesity, and the second is focusing on self-harming. I'll start a little with health. Health is super important to our happiness and well-being. I'm quite sure that we would all appreciate that. It matters to society greatly because we not only support the economy, but we are the economy. With regards to emotional engagement in virtual reality, to have an impactful experience, when we look at the obesity and the self-harming project, we'll be really looking at what makes those emotional and engaging experiences. I'll talk a little bit about risk later on. When I was writing this, I thought, what's a good example of a small everyday risk, or nearly everyday risk? Checking a suitcase at an airport, that'll do. That's a great example, Emma Jane. So I was feeling all clever about this until you see where this is going. When I left Laramie, Wyoming yesterday and happily waved off my suitcase, it was not in Chicago yesterday when I arrived. So I thought, well, okay, does this change anything about the line in the talk? And I thought, well, not really. I managed the risk. I accepted the risk. And if anything, it illustrates what Brandon said a few moments ago about how we just don't know if things are going to work sometimes. And that's what research is. We just don't know if it's going to work and if we're going to get the outcome we want. But we have to at least give ourselves the opportunity to try. With regards to education, we send our kids to school and we go to school to learn the fundamentals and to learn a trade, perhaps to be able to support the workforce development of our fast-changing economy. We do all those things because it's just what we do. But really what we also want is for our children to not just be learning reading, writing, and math, but we want them to be understanding what entrepreneurialism is and how to be creative with sciences. Also, in a few moments, I'll be making reference to high-end multi-million-dollar facilities. These centers for often become real catalysts for change and innovation, but they are traditionally stuck in a rather old-school environment, which is very risk-averse. So I'll touch on a few topics as to how that's changing. So first of all, I'd like to zoom in to the case study regarding obesity. Oh, here we go. Here were some nice images for health, risk, and education. Do you enjoy those? There we go. So the first obesity project is called 3D Future Form. So about 12 years ago, I had a baby. I gained an undisclosed amount of weight. And I took myself off to a weight loss group, and I thought, this is great. Okay, I can do this. And I was given a little card that said, here's your height. Great, I agree with that. Here's your weight, thanks, nice to know, that's why I'm here. And a goal weight, and I thought, splendid, okay, I'm supposed to be this number on a piece of paper that I don't think I've ever been in my life. How is this going to work? How is this actually going to go down? I was mostly looking at the number also thinking, I don't think I've ever weighed that in my adult life. I have no mental model, I have no photographs, I have no way to identify with how this is going to happen. And what's really happening is, I was sitting there in class thinking, I'm paying money for an end product here, and the end product is me, isn't it? A different size and shape. That's what I'm paying for. Now, normally when you buy a product, you can try it before you buy it. You can taste a sample at the store, you can go into a fitting room with a pair of jeans, or 10, like I do, and you can try these things on and see how it feels. You watch the trailer for a movie before you go. Hang on a minute, let's go back to the example about a changing room for a moment. When you go into that changing room, why couldn't I go into some kind of changing room and try myself on a healthy weight? That would motivate me. That would motivate me. What if I could try myself on an even more unhealthy weight? That would perhaps motivate me even more. So I thought about these things once I decided that the number on the page wasn't enough and I couldn't identify with it, and this is ridiculous. And I was sitting in the back of the weight loss club of an undisclosed brand, and I closed my eyes for a moment and I looked down in the chair and I just imagined what it would look like to see a bit more of the chair on each side of me. And I just tried to imagine what that would look like, and I clapped dutifully at the end of class, and I took my newly purchased kitchen scales and low-fat cereal bars home, and I wrote a business plan for 3D Future Form, thinking, I think we can do something for this using virtual reality. So the first image you see here is of the developer at the time wearing a head-mounted display, and the second image is of what she can see in the virtual environment. She's in a fitting room, she can see herself, and she's standing in the same pose. What happens when you're in 3D Future Form is you have a fully tracked, first-person, 3D to scale experience of yourself. So you're not just looking in the virtual mirror. What you can also do is what we can all do now. We can all look down and see our body and our shape, and we can see our feet and our hands, and as I move, everything moves as I expect it to do. And in 3D Future Form, you can do that. one of the first questions of 3D Futureform is, can it help support the issue of body dysmorphia? So anyone that's either wanted or needed to lose or gain weight or change their physique somehow, if you don't have a good mental model of how you look today, it's a lot harder because you don't really know the starting point to begin with. But with 3D Futureform, you step out of yourself and you walk around yourself a bit like you're looking at a virtual mannequin, and you can do what you can't do, what we all try and do in a fitting room when there's no one looking and there's 10 mirrors around us, that kind of thing. So the real question about 3D Futureform is, can experiencing yourself in a healthy body in virtual reality create autonomy in motivation? That's the key here. Can it create autonomy in motivation? Can it actually give you that visual reference and that mental model as to what you're trying to achieve and the how? So what it can also do is to show you incremental changes. The image at the bottom, depending on which way you read it, the user is either gaining weight or losing weight. Now, quite often in this process, the very small changes you can't see and you can't even feel sometimes. But what you could do is give people a first-person experience of these small changes. This could be a very powerful tool when it comes to virtual reality being used in the weight management industry. It could really build brand intimacy. If you think about all the products and things that were sold or that people try to sell us, that often has someone else who's paid by the brand to look good, to try and make us feel good about ourselves, or to make us feel bad about ourselves that we want to look better. Well, what could possibly be more inspiring than having an experience of yourself in a really, really healthy physique, feeling good and looking good? That could be a pretty inspiring thing. I'd like to zoom out for a moment. Oh, and of course my final picture is just a little reminder as to what a large global crisis obesity is. These catalysts for change. What I'd like to do now is to zoom out from that first case study and to talk more broadly about education and facilities. It's rather apt that we saw a little image of Einstein a moment ago, Nick, because what I wanted to remind us here is that he said if we knew what we were doing, it would not be called research, would it? Now, we can just leave that hanging in the air, and it's just a quote on the screen in the top left corner, but it actually means a great deal to everybody here on this table. And it's an incredible and very moving thing hearing Brandon point out that, yeah, we don't know if these things are going to work, but we would like to try. So these facilities, these big buildings that go up at university campuses and different kinds of institutes, these multi-million-dollar facilities have to be envisioned, funded, directed, and managed. They don't just spring up, of course. And there's often huge, high expectations on these kinds of facilities. And understandably so, it makes terrible headlines if X $1,000 invested in blah, blah, blah didn't produce results. That hurts, and that's painful, and that's bad PR, and it's hard to read. But the reality is a lot of the time some amazing output from really innovative play can drive things like licensable technology and IP and create whole new communities of practice, which is a really important thing. Some of the students that we have at the University of Wyoming come and work with me in the Visualization Center. And one of the first things we discuss is how we actually do what are called agile scrums every morning and talk about our day. And we make them share successes and failures. And when I ask them to do this, they look a little horrified. They're happy to share the positives, don't want to go anywhere near to sharing the failures, and don't want to acknowledge when they do fail. But we really stipulate this and make it part of what we do, because it's important to make it culturally acceptable to fail, and not to fail in a safe place either. That's not true. That's not real failure. But to fail where it's going to count and where it's going to matter, because then you're going to learn. And yeah, it makes us all feel pretty darn uncomfortable thinking about failing when it comes to human fusion. Just to clarify, sticking humans and robots and electronics and things together, it kind of makes my voice tremble a little bit just to think about it. But it's something that we have to give a lot of time to. So we try and get students out of their comfort zone. I make it really clear to them that if they don't at some point in the next 6 months come out of the room that houses the $1.8 million cave with some kind of ashen look on their face, panic that they've broken it, they're probably not trying hard enough. They're not pushing themselves. I'm not pushing them. They're just in their lovely comfort zone, enjoying the technology and not really striving for anything. In contrast to the large, big multi-million-dollar facilities, small research groups that often have very limited resources can be pretty agile in what they do. They can be very high in experienced expert human capital, and they're often unencumbered by issues of sustainability that often large new facilities have. But from these new diverse teams that form the technicals that often support and build a lot of the things we're talking about today, as well as traditional academic skills, what we also need are things like Agile Scrum Master training, how to work with a client, how to be able to do small iterative changes to your work, as well as things like different kinds of certification for software platforms. We've already heard a little bit today on the importance of disciplines being merged. Universities now have professors of practice, which is a fantastic change, and we have what were steadfast risk-averse institutes are now allowing for failure, and they're doing that by using things like business competitions and mentoring and maker spaces and supported incubator facilities to really encourage students to branch out and do those kinds of things. Now, one point I'd just like to make as well, we've talked a little bit about different ways to augment ourselves. Now, we're all here today because we want to share our stories and we want to listen and we want to share, and that's great, and you're all in the room with us to do exactly that. We also have some people that aren't in the room with us, that are on Skype streaming. I don't actually know what method of delivery they're using, but we're being filmed today, which is great, and that's wonderful for the people listening and watching. But there is something different about that kind of experience. Now, 25 minutes ago, we were all pausing and holding our breath and not moving too much and being very moved and listening to Brandon. And there was something very special about that and something very humbling for us all, and we could all feel it in the room, couldn't we? Well, experiencing that via Skype, it's a little bit different. And if we want to be augmenting ourselves into different places, we need to think about how to make that kind of experience at one with what happens in the room. I'm not very good at advancing my slides, am I? Here's some pictures of the technology we have in the Viz Centre. And we, of course, have things like institutional review boards to help support experimentations with human subjects. Now, the next project I'd like to make reference to is called Virtual Self-Harming. And that does exactly what I'm going to describe it's going to do. The next image is a computer-generated image from a live simulation that the developer is using. So the developer is working on a program that's actually some research with one of the members of faculty in our psychology department. Her name is Dr. Carolyn Pepper. And Carolyn Pepper has a research question to heart of this. And the research question is seeing blood an important part of emotion regulation in non-suicidal self-cutting? So she wants to know if when someone has experience with self-harming, if they do it in virtual reality and see a little line of blood on their arm, does it give them some relief? Do they feel better? That's what she wants to find out. Now, the experiments have actually been in flow this summer, and before the end of the year, we're hoping to have some results from this. Now, often when you run visualization centers and it's your shop, you kind of know all the projects that are going to come in. I know when someone walks in what department they're from or what kind of data set they've got, I know what we're going to do with them. I did not see this project coming. And when she was talking to me about the work, I got a little bit uncomfortable, and I didn't quite have enough experience to draw on to think about this. But that's the beauty of when you get really collaborative, true, deep innovation happening. Those moments of discomfort and of unknown and uncertainty, and that's okay. So I'd like to start concluding, if I may, and I'd like to zoom out again, advancing my slides this time, and I'd like to look at the bigger picture. Another quotation, which I'm quite sure you'll all be familiar with, is, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside of his skin and walk around in it." Let's hit the pause button on there for a moment. Until you climb inside of his skin and walk around in it. Now, let's think about these first two case studies. First, the unhealthy weight user, and secondly, the user who self-harms, who wants to have a therapeutic, safe treatment. Well, what if we could turn this experience completely inside out now? What if we could give the bariatric surgeon an experience of the obese patient? What if we could give the therapist an experience of what it's like to do self-harming to oneself? Now, we have to be careful here. Virtual reality has a reputation of being the empathy machine. Now, whether that is or is not the case, I don't want to debate right now, but what it definitely is a tool to aid understanding, including experiential understanding. On the 25th of August 2017, Human Fusion meant something different to me. It was actually my birthday at the time, and I forget that every single time I tell this, because I clearly was busy doing something else on the day. This is a photograph of my eldest daughter. I didn't know it, but at the time she was type 1 diabetic, and she went into ketoacidosis, got really sick, and had to have some treatment for a few days to get well again. And then Human Fusion, to me, suddenly meant this. Having a girl that has a continuous glucose monitor stuck on her arm and an insulin pod stuck on her leg. Luckily, she loves the technology. She thinks it's great. It's kind of a highlight for her. She feels pretty good with the technology on her. She takes care and interest in maintaining it. I don't think it's really until you yourself or somebody very close to you has an experience that requires the intervention of Human Fusion. I don't think until that happens you fully appreciate that you want to have it as an option and you want it on the table. Whether it's to replace a limb or whether it's to counter a faulty pancreas. Having it as the option is very important. So in conclusion, we all have innate desires to share stories. We're demonstrating that today, if nothing else, I feel. And we have to share our stories because otherwise they disappear and we cannot allow that to happen. It's the whole purpose of the roundtable today. The stories of our physical and emotional experiences are even more important. It's really also important we have an agile mindset to constitute what's good for us and what's good for society, and we have to be open-minded to really embrace that fully. Human fusion, the revolution that we're talking about now, really needs ethical vision and an intelligent, wise leadership. And an agile education system, very importantly. And rather than just follow the masses, now is the time to lead the herd in a very mindful direction that's going to benefit society. It's been a pleasure contributing today. Thank you very much indeed.